Hello Pokemon trainers, welcome back to another Pokemon TCG Pocket video here on iStarly TV. So Shining Revelry comes out tomorrow as of the making of this video, and through data mines, I believe, every single card from the set has now been revealed. I guess you could say leaked, because these are not officially released, but these are the cards in Shining Revelry. So I'm not going to talk about every single card here. I will post a link in the description if you want to check it out. It'll show all of the cards that are in the set. But I wanted to talk about the top 5 cards that I think will make the biggest impact in the game. And of course, spoiler warning first of all, in case you don't want to be spoiled for cards that you don't know about. If that's the case for you, feel free to come back to this video later and see how wrong my predictions were. And also, I think a good disclaimer is worth mentioning that I have no idea how great these cards are going to be, and I think all of us who follow this game probably don't know exactly which of these cards will be great. I think Dialga, for example, Dialga EX, when it was first revealed, a lot of people were hyped about it, and then I think early on people were not that hyped, like people figured it wasn't that great. And then, of course, it's now one of the best cards in the game because it pairs really well with Arceus. So just an example of like situations where we don't really know how good a card is going to be until we know the context of the meta. And I'm going to be honest, this set overall does not seem all that powerful to me, in my opinion. There are a few really interesting looking cards, but a lot of the EXs, and there are a lot of EXs in the set, are not insanely powerful. So we'll see how they end up doing. Maybe I'll be super wrong and the meta will be crazy with Shining Revelry cards, but either way, here are my top 5 cards for Shining Revelry. I'm going to start with a couple of honorable mentions here. So my 2 honorable mentions are Pachirisu and Pokemon Center Lady. So Pachirisu is a basic electric type Pokemon. It has 70 HP and it has an attack for 1 electric energy. It does 10 damage, and it can put an electric energy onto one of your electric benched Pokemon. So this is very similar to Manaphy, except notably it has 70 HP where Manaphy has 50. That is huge. Also, it actually does a little bit of damage, whereas Manaphy's attack doesn't do any damage. Obviously, where Manaphy is better than this is that it can put energy onto more than 1 Pokemon, and it can put energy onto Pokemon that are not water types. But I still think Pachirisu can be a very interesting card in the game because there are a lot of strong electric types that you can power up, including, of course, the new Pikachu EX. So I really like Pachirisu in a very specific deck, and I honestly would not mind building around it. It also has a shiny variant in this set, so it'll be cool if you open a shiny Pachirisu, maybe you'll want to build an electric deck around it. And Pokemon Center Lady heals 30 damage from one of your Pokemon, and it removes its status conditions. So she heals your Pokemon and also removes any like poison or paralysis or confusion or anything along those lines. This, I think, I'm not sure how good this will be. Obviously 30 damage, or healing 30 is a lot, but in grass and water decks right now, we have Erica and Irida respectively, and Irida does not even need to be played specifically in a water Pokemon deck. So we have a lot of ways of healing a lot of damage. Of course, we also have Potion, which heals less than this, but also can be used. It's not a supporter, so it can be used whenever. And this is a supporter, but I think where this could be really interesting is in a deck that I've been really enjoying, which is the Snorlax Berry deck, because Snorlax can do 100 damage, which is a lot, but it puts itself to sleep. So healing Snorlax, because Snorlax has a massive HP stat, as well as removing that sleep condition, can be really interesting. But obviously this card will be good, but something I also want to talk about is as we get more and more cards, we get more and more supporters, it becomes a little harder to choose which supporters to put into the decks, because there's a lot of really good, really situational supporters, but we don't want our entire deck to be filled with supporters, because then you can only play like 1 card a turn other than your Pokemon. So we need to continue to find that balance between supporters and non-supporters. And, this is a supporter, which is really good, but I think it's very contextual. Now, starting in at number 5, we have Rocket Grunt. This is an insane card. This is a really weird card. It's basically like the anti-Misty. You flip until you get Tails, and for each heads, you can remove an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. That is crazy. Obviously, that has potential to be insane. Like, that has potential to just destroy your opponent's day, which is really exciting. But I think this will be very meta dependent. If the opponent's playing a deck where they can do a lot of damage for like 1 or 2 energy, obviously this is not going to be good. So for example, if you're up against Rampardos, this card's pretty bad. This card almost does nothing because obviously if you remove an energy from Rampardos, they can just put it right back on next turn. But if you're playing against something like Arceus or even Celebi, this does have potential to ruin their day and completely destroy them. However, it is based on coin flips, and if you've played Misty before, you know that there are going to be times where you get 10 heads, and then there's going to be times when you get that immediate tails. So this card is very luck-based. I think it's a really cool card. It'll be interesting to see how it fits in the meta. I think just because it has so much potential to be really crazy powerful, I wanted to put it on the list, but I also don't really know if I'll be playing it. It depends on the meta. If there's a lot of big energy decks, like decks that play a lot of energy, then I'm happy playing this. But if it's a good balance, like if Rampardos is a really prominent deck, I might not want to play this quite as much. Number 4, we have Gholdengo. Now, Gholdengo's really interesting. It's basically a metal-type Celebi. It has an attack for 3 energy, and you flip coins until you get tails. You flip coins for each metal energy attached to Gholdengo. For each heads, you do 50 damage. So, a few ways that this is better and worse than Celebi. First of all, it only counts metal energy attached to it, whereas Celebi counts any energy. So Celebi works in like an Irida deck with Leafeon, where you can put energy on Celebi. You can put water energy onto Celebi, and it still counts. Unfortunately, Gholdengo has to have metal energy on it. Of course, the card that everyone's talking about with this card is Dialga EX, which is already a really good card in the meta. But this is a stage 1, so, you know, I'm not so sure. I think this card is powerful, and of course, playing a metal deck gives you access to Dialga. It also gives you access to, like, Adaman, so it gives you access to these cards that Celebi does not have access to, but of course, Celebi also has its share of supporters. It has Erica, it also has cards like Serperior, as well as Leafeon, so I don't know if this card is necessarily better than Celebi. I think it's different. Also, Gholdengo needs at least 3 energy on it in order to start attacking, whereas Celebi only needs 2. So it takes longer for you to start setting up with Gholdengo, but I still think it's potentially interesting. I really like it, and I like Gholdengo as a Pokemon, so if I open a couple of these, I will definitely build a deck around it and try it, but you know, I don't think, obviously it's comparable to Celebi, but I don't think it's worth it to say whether it's better or worse, because it's both. Next we have Red. Red is a card that was revealed with the trailer a few days ago, and Red deals, it's basically like a Giovanni, but it deals 20 extra damage with your Pokemon, but only if the enemy's active Pokemon is an EX. So it does 20 extra damage to EX Pokemon. That's obviously really good, and sometimes with 20 extra damage, you can hit important breakpoints that'll knock out your opponent's Pokemon. That is super important, I think. The downside, of course, is that 1, this is a supporter, and 2, if your opponent does not have an EX Pokemon in play, this card does nothing. So once again, if you're playing against like Rampardos, which I think will continue to be a very good deck, this card does nothing, because the Rampardos decks usually don't play any EX Pokemon, so if you have Red in your deck and your opponent's playing Lucario Rampardos, well, you have a dead card in your deck, which is really awkward. But, of course, if you're playing against like Dialga and Arceus, or a lot of other decks that have strong EXs, this card can be very strong. So, I don't know if you ever want to play 2 copies of this in your decks, unless we're in a meta where like literally every deck has EXs, but I do like how while EXs are super powerful in this game, we're getting to a point where sometimes you don't want to play them, or sometimes you play other things that are not EXs, and that makes these cards like obviously good when they're against EXs, but not always good. And then coming in at number 2, we have Meowscarada, which is another Pokemon. I think this is a card that a lot of people are looking at as one of the strongest cards in the set. I do think it's really, really powerful. The downside is that it's a stage 2. Personally, I'm always really iffy about playing stage 2s, but Meowscarada, for 2 grass energy, it does 60 damage, and if the opponent is an EX, it does plus 70 more damage. So it does 130 damage to EX Pokemon. kind of same deal as red. You know, I kind of talked about the situation there. Now, I guess one upside to Meowscarada that a lot of these other specific EX cards don't have is the fact that when we're talking about the Rampardos deck that I keep talking about, Meowscarada is actually super effective against Rampardos. Specifically Rampardos, not Lucario, not Marshadow, but it can do extra damage to Rampardos. So in situations where you're playing against Rampardos, you know, obviously Meowscarada's attack is not going to be that great, but it'll still do that bonus damage because of Rampardos' weakness. So that can still come in handy there. That can still help you out. Another thing that I think makes Meowscarada really good here is actually another card, which is its pre-evolution Sprigatito. Sprigatito for 1 energy, one grass energy, searches your deck for a grass Pokemon and puts it into your hand. So that can actually be really interesting. Obviously, again, Meowscarada is a stage 2, which can be awkward, but Sprigatito can help find its evolutions to help you more easily play the Meowscarada. So I'm wondering if there's a world where we could play a deck with Meowscarada, the Meowscarada line as the only grass Pokemon in the deck, and then maybe play like Druddigon, or maybe play some normal types or something, so that we can, when we use Sprigatito's attack, the only Pokemon that it can find are Pokemon in the Meowscarada evolutionary line, which increases the odds and makes the deck a lot more consistent. So I'm going to try a deck like that built around Meowscarada and some non-grass Pokemon and see how that does. But of course, Meowscarada is a really strong Pokemon. Of course, it has its downsides, but let me know what you think about it in the comments. And finally, we have, in my opinion, what I would say might be the strongest card in the set. Again, you might have a different opinion, and let me know in the comments what you think is the #1 strongest card in the set. But I'm going to say it's actually Giratina EX. Giratina EX has 150 HP. It is a basic Pokemon. It's an EX, and it can support itself. It has a really strong attack for 4 energy. It does 130 damage, but it does 20 to itself. However, it can, 130 is a lot. That kills a lot of things, as we've seen with Rampardos. It's kind of like a pseudo Rampardos. Rampardos, of course, is a stage 2, so that's a downside, but Giratina requires a little bit more setup than Rampardos. But the beautiful thing is Giratina can support itself. It can set up for itself, which I think is really strong. And also continuing to talk about this Lucario Rampardos deck, Lucario and Marshadow and a lot of the other fighting types that they play in those decks are weak to Psychics. You can just kind of plow through them. I mean, I guess to be fair, you knock out Lucario anyway, even if it wasn't weak to Psychic, but the downside is doing 20 damage to yourself here, so you're going to want to be playing cards like Potion. I guess this is another card where you would want to play the Pokemon Center Lady, because you can't play this with Irida or Erica. But yeah, I think Giratina is really good. A lot of the other EXs in the set are like stage 1s or stage 2s. And even beyond that, they don't seem that powerful. They don't seem that great. So I think, in my opinion, Giratina could be the strongest EX in the set. Pikachu looks interesting too, but it requires more setup, and it cannot set up itself, whereas Giratina can. So yeah, I mean, that's my top 5 for Shining Revelry. Let me know in the comments what you think. Let me know in the comments how wrong you think I am. I'd be interested in hearing, different opinions as well. But I'm really excited for the set, and again, who knows, maybe there's some EXs that I'm not talking about here that actually will be very good. So leave a comment, leave a like, please subscribe for more Pokemon TCG Pocket videos, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and good luck on all your pulls. May all of you get at least one shiny Pokemon when you first open your packs. See you soon.